Please be seated. First of all, let me say once again, Happy New Year. There we go. I hope you have all made your resolutions. Yes, yeah. Well, it's important to do these resolutions, because you've got to start the year off right, don't you? You make the resolutions, and the best thing about them is after January 2nd, nobody will remember what it was, and you can forget about it. But it's important to start off right? That's what I like about today's gospel. Jesus doesn't have such a good start to things. Let me back up for just a moment, if you will. There are actually 4 things I like about today's gospel, at least 4, but we'll start with 4. The first thing I like about today's gospel is that this is the first appearance of Jesus after the Magi left. Actually, in Luke's gospel, there are no Magi to start off with, so it's his first appearance really after his birth. And how does he make this first appearance after his birth? By getting into trouble. I love that. Second, this is the only passage in all the Gospels where Jesus shows up as a kid. Why is that, I wonder? We'll get to that one in a minute. Third, this one is where Jesus fully embraces all of his humanity in the most wonderful adolescent way. I mean, right at the onset of adolescence, with all of the attitude that comes with it. And the fourth thing I like about this passage is it shows just how saintly Mary and Joseph are. Because let me tell you, if I'd ever pulled anything like that when I was his age, well, actually I did. So I can tell you what the result was, and it was not my parents saying, "Child, why have you treated us like this?" And if I had dared to come up with a response like he had, the modern equivalent, which would have been roughly, "Well, where did you think I'd be? Duh." My mother, I promise, would not have treasured this in her heart. But seriously, why did Luke do this? Why did Luke put this story in here of this adolescent Jesus? And he's really specific, 12 years old. Nobody else bothered to do that. And quite frankly, this passage gets sort of thrown away a lot of the times. Oh, it's kind of neat, he's got a little kid's story. But I would argue with you that this is actually a really important moment. And that Luke put it in there for a really specific reason. You may have remembered at the very beginning of the gospel, Luke says something, he's writing to Theophilus, and he says, "Listen, others tried, and they did okay, but they got things wrong. I'm going to set you right." I think this is one of the things he wants to set right. Because in Mark and John, did you notice that Jesus just shows up fully formed as an adult? Even in Matthew, you've got this wonderful story, and you've got the Magi, and then he disappears until he's an adult. With Luke, Jesus doesn't show up with his ministry with a miracle. He doesn't, turn water into wine at a wedding. And he doesn't show up at a baptism where the voice of God comes down and says, "You are my son with whom I am pleased." No, he shows up getting in trouble, driving his parents crazy. And he shows up not as the wise teacher, but as a kid with a cracking voice, and you can only imagine some acne. The reason for this is because when you just show up with Jesus as a full-formed a full-formed person, we'll get the adult part in there, a full-formed adult who comes in there with this great wisdom, it's very easy to fall into the temptation of thinking that he's not really completely 100% human. He is, after all, the Son of God. And because of that, he can sort of pop in here and there wherever he wants, skipping over, the awkward parts or the uninteresting parts or the unimportant parts. And because of that, many people fell into the error of thinking, well, if he wasn't really completely 100% human, then maybe what he was doing on the cross all along was just pretending. That it wasn't real. And for Luke, it is essential for us to know that Jesus was really, really human. And how better to show that than to show this kid right at the onset of adolescence when everything starts to change. And if you've ever had an adolescent in your house, you know, as this story indicates, that change isn't always pleasant for everybody involved. But it's essential. And that moment in life is one of those crucial moments where he has to become aware of who he is. If you can think back to your adolescence, you might remember sort of all these little lights going off in your head. And you think, I'm not the same as everybody else. And you think, my parents aren't as smart as I thought they were. And you start the distancing process, which is essential. You have to do it. If Jesus really and truly is fully human, that means he is not spared that rush of hormones. He is not spared the acne. He's not spared the cracking voice. And he's not spared that moment where he has to look and see that his parents are, in fact, not all-knowing. And he has to figure out who he is. No wonder, then, that he finds himself at the temple, where his awareness of himself, not just as the Son of God, but as one who will have a mission, starts now. I remember when I was about that age, sitting up there as an acolyte. And it was at that moment, one of those days, I sat there and I looked at the priest, and I thought, yeah, I could do that. It's a crucial point in life. And that's what Jesus is doing. And Luke is showing us that Jesus has to decide. He has to become aware of who he is. And this is the moment. So for Luke, the crucifixion and the resurrection can't really happen if it's not real. It doesn't mean anything if it's not real. And how does he show that it's real? Certainly by a birth, but not just by the birth. By a kid becoming an adult, growing up, and having that moment of self-awareness. For Luke, it was essential, as our collect says today, that Jesus humbled himself to be one of us. And so, as awkward as that moment in today's gospel is, Luke would say, it is, in fact, starting right. Amen.